Hi chess fans, we're looking at the game between Karpov with white and Nunn with black, played in Amsterdam 1985. Karpov played e4, Nunn replied c5, and after knight f3, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, takes, a6, bishop e2, e5, knight b3, bishop e7, castle, bishop e3, bishop e6, queen d2, knight bd7, a4, rook c8, a5, queen c7, rook fd1, rook fd8, queen e1, queen c6, bishop f3, bishop c4. We have reached this position, and Karpov plays a very interesting move positionally to improve his position in pieces. Take a moment and see which move would you play in this position. Okay, take a look at this knight. It doesn't have many good squares it can go to at the moment. So Karpov decides to improve this knight by playing it to c1. So what's the idea behind this move? The idea is to reroute the knight to this beautiful square on d5, and on the way from here also hitting the queen. So very interesting move, knight to c1. The game continued h6, knight to a2, knight c5, knight to b4, and the queen has to drop back to e8. Now in this position, Karpov plays another move to improve his pieces. Let's see if you can find the next move. So have a look at this bishop here. These squares here are controlled by this knight, which is also very important to control this square. But this makes the bishop a little less valuable. So Karpov played g3 with the idea of dropping the bishop back so that the bishop keeps on eyeing the e4 pawn, but also could potentially swing back over here. And this pawn structure here might also play against this bishop here and make it really bad. It's a very interesting move in this position, g3. It's interesting that Karpov does not decide to place a knight here right away, but he really takes his time and improves his pieces further. Very instructive. After rook c7, bishop g2, rook d c8, b3, the bishop is being kicked back, knight cd5. Finally the knight jumps into the d5 square. And after a few exchanges, we have reached this position here. White has the bishop pair, and black potentially has a weakness here. And this bishop is not so strong. It's limited in its activities by these pawns, and of course this pawn, and also this knight here at the moment doesn't have good squares. Black is having the rook battery here on this pawn, but we will see what happens in the game and how Karpov deals with this situation. So first of all, rook to c6, protecting this pawn, overprotecting this pawn, and after rook a1, knight to e6, the knight is being rerouted to eye on this square here. The pawn is attacked, so Karpov plays c4, and now Nunn wants to exchange the dark squared bishops so that this square here becomes available for the knight. So how would you deal with this situation? Very interesting. Karpov played bishop to a7. So he could have put the bishop here, but he realizes that the main function of the bishop is to protect this square here, and there's no need to put it here at the moment. And in fact, the game continued rook a8, attacking the bishop, and now the bishop goes to b6, with the rook slightly placed here, a little bit worse. Okay, so very interesting in this position. Karpov, the world champion, plays bishop to a7. Very instructive. Black wants to still exchange the bishops, but Karpov simply drops back. And in this position, Nunn played bishop c7. Now, how would you continue here with white? Very, very interesting next move by Karpov. Okay, so Karpov realizes that this bishop is great, this bishop is great, these rooks are great. Okay, he also realizes that this rook doesn't have so many squares, this bishop is not so good, this rook is not so good over here, so it's time for some very, very concrete actions. And he plays queen to e2, and the idea is to march this pawn forward. And to do that, Karpov prepares by protecting the pawn on c4. Very, very interesting and instructive plan. And the idea is that, similar to when the queen was on this square here, white chooses a plan that wins a tempo by pushing the queen back. And something similar happens here, because by marching this pawn forward, this rook is being hit. So we come in again with a tempo. And black is realizing this danger and tries to play against this plan and become active himself. And after b6, b4, b takes, white continues by pushing this pawn forward. So white sacrifices a pawn, and after takes, the rook is attacked, and it cannot go to any of these squares here. It would be taken here, 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 and here. So the only square where it would not be taken is the c3 square, but in this case the pawn would just push forward and would become very, very lethal. The rook is attacked, and at the same time the pawn is protected by the queen. For example, if the rook drops back, it's already game over. So that's why Nunn already had to play rook c5, and Karpov wins in exchange for the pawn. Now in this position here, Karpov has an exchange for a pawn, and now comes again a very, very instructive move. I will give you a hint. White plays against black's advantage in this position. Black has one key resource and white plays against that resource in a very instructive way. So white played bishop to f1. And what's the idea behind this move? Well, black's resource is this pawn here, and this pawn will march. And white's plan by playing bishop f1 is to reroute the bishop over here and then block the pawn like this. Very, very interesting. And the game continued indeed. a4, queen c2, making space for the bishop. a3 and bishop c4. Now the pawn is stopped. It would be captured if it advanced. So white has basically neutralized black's advantage. The game continued knight to e6. Now with the bishop out of the way, arguably another advantage that black has is to place the knight on the favorable square of d4. But white kind of neutralizes this by playing the rook down, or anticipates it by playing the rook down, attacking the pawn. So white is playing against the pawn with all of its forces. And knight to d4 simply is met by queen a2, and now all of the squares that the knight would have are protected by white's pieces, and the pawn's attacked 2 times and can actually be not protected. At the same time, this bishop is nicely keeping the pawn down here, which keeps in turn the bishop down, and also nicely protects this pawn. So, for example, um, after knight takes, protecting the pawn and winning a pawn, white could simply play bishop takes, queen takes, and win the pawn. The game continued bishop to b6. Black tries to defend a little bit more stubbornly, but the pawn is lost immediately, and here black resigned. It's a very instructive game by Karpov. Let's look at the key moments where he played the knight to c1 to reroute it, where in this position he played g3 to improve the position of the bishop a little bit further, where here he played the bishop to a7, avoiding the exchange and luring the rook to a little bit worse place. In this position where he played queen e2 with this deep plan of pushing the b pawn forward, and in this position bishop f1 with the long-term idea of stopping the pawn. And these are really just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ideas that made Karpov win this game. So I hope you found this video instructive, and see you here on my channel soon again.